I recently lost a few deals to competition, and there were some really good lessons embedded, and I'm going to share those with you. And fundamentally, I'm going to share with you how I think about absolutely crushing your competition, and specifically and very tactically what I'm doing to ensure competition will not be a concern. And so if you have a business or are thinking about starting one, you may find this useful. My name is Ryan Rice. I'm a full-time real estate investor. I'm in my 5th year, and I make these with the hopes that it makes you some more money. So as I was thinking about how to make your competition irrelevant, there were 3 things that came to mind. 1, whoever focused on the customer wins. 2, your goal isn't to win today's customer. Your goal is to never stop getting them. And 3, you just have to get better. And I'm going to dive into all 3. First is whoever focuses on the customer is the one who wins. I saw this story on Michael Phelps. Hopefully you know who he is. If you don't, one of the most decorated Olympians of all time, amazing swimmer. And there was this thing where he won on his last run where he was winning one of his gold medals. There was this other swimmer who was talking a lot of trash about how much he was going to beat Michael Phelps. Well, ironically, when it came down to the final stretch that was going to decide who won the gold medal, a photographer captured this picture, and it was Phelps very focused on his destination and like outstretching his arm towards the end so that he could finish the race. And the swimmer who was talking all the trash was looking at Michael Phelps. And of course, Michael Phelps won. And I just love that, because if you focus on your competition, then ultimately you will never beat the person who is focused on the goal. And in business, the goal tends to be the customer. And I personally find this concept very useful because as I just lost out on 3 deals to competition, it is easy to get sucked in the trap of trying to figure out what it is that they're doing, as opposed to how can I just better serve my customer? And so how do you better serve your customer? Well, we're going to get into that in the 3rd principle I talked about, which was get better. But the second thing was your goal isn't to win today's customer. It's to never stop getting them. And simply put, what I mean by that is if you have 2 teams and one team will do whatever it takes to close the one deal that's right in front of them, and the other team will prioritize their brand and their values, and probably most importantly, the actual customer, that means there will be customers that are not the best fit, and you will turn them away because it is in their best interest. And in the long run, that is going to help you get and continue to get more and more customers. And I grew up playing sports, and so I will tend to use sports analogies, but an analogy that came to mind when I was thinking about this is it's kind of the equivalent of someone who cheats in sports to win. And so what happens in the short term? Well, they win, they get all of the status, they get all of the fame, they get everything that comes along with winning. But what happens in the long run? I don't know of a single story in sports where someone cheated and eventually that didn't come to light. And so the long term is essentially everything that they, quote, worked so hard for, even though they were cheating, it's tarnished by the fact that there is a clear explanation for why they win. It's not their hard work ethic or whatever, it's because they cheated. And the conversation is not a moral conversation because, frankly, I personally don't really care what you do. It's simply being very crystal clear on what it is that you want. What are your goals? And optimizing for what you want 10 years from now, not only what it is that you want tomorrow. And the reason why I think this is important in business is because if you optimize for an outcome that is 10 years in the future, you will perform different behaviors than if you optimize for an outcome that you are prioritizing tomorrow. And since in business, there is no winner in business, the goal of a game is just to be able to keep playing. That means that you want to build a business that has longevity and that will never stop getting customers. And if you start to do business and your reputation is tarnished because of the way that you do business, and enough people find out about that, Well, you are going to have to work extra hard over the course of 10 years to continue to just maintain your business due to the negative word of mouth, as opposed to prioritizing your brand, what you stand for, your product, your service, making it amazing, and everyone telling everyone else how great you are. To tie this all in, the reason why I think this is important when talking about competition is because you may see or you may lose customers to your competition, and the reason why is because your competitors may be doing something to win in the short term, but there's no way that it has longevity. Well, if you adopt that strategy, it may help you win those customers in the short term, but then what is going to happen over the course of 10 years? Which ties back to the first thing I said, whoever focuses on the customer the most is who wins. And I am finding that in business, that might just take time. It takes time to build brand. It takes time to build reputation. But if you focus on ways to never stop getting customers, then at some point you don't even need to worry about what your competition is doing because you're so obsessed with what your customer is doing. And the third thing I want to touch on here is getting better. And getting better from the frame of how can you service your customer so well that your competition is literally irrelevant. And the first part of get better here that I want to touch on, and this is something that I am actively learning, is how important it is to help similar clients. And here's what I mean. If your business solves the problem of everyone, you're going to have so many different problems to solve that will require so many different solutions that can you really get good at any of them? And what I am finding is the more targeted you are on a very specific type of client, the better you can serve them because you are serving just that one client, and therefore you are constantly iterating on the same problem over and over and over and iterating on delivering on a similar solution. And I mean similar in a couple different ways. I mean similar in as they are relatively homogenous. They maybe they act the same, maybe they need the same things, but the clients themselves are similar. And I also mean similar in terms of similar to who it is that you want to serve. And I want to tell a story just to illustrate what I mean here. One of the clients who I lost to a competitor recently, and this one hurt because it was a really, really good house in a really killer neighborhood, and I spent a significant amount of time. And I was beating myself up so much about losing this deal, and I was like, oh my gosh, who is this woman? I'm going to figure out, like, what is it that I need to figure out about what I can do differently to get this type of client next time. And as I researched this woman, I found out that she was recently evicted from a hotel, from an extended stay, because she refused to leave this hotel, and I guess she wasn't paying. And as I looked further, the reason it appeared that she was in the hotel to begin with was because her family kicked her out of the house, and this was documented in a lawsuit, for some very nefarious reason. And the whole point of the story is I wanted the house so bad, but is that like, do I really want to work with people with character like that? Is that really my ideal client? Is that really who I want to spend my time with and try to serve? And after thinking about that, well, maybe not. And so I was thinking about that further. Well, how do I identify in the sales process if it is a seller of an avatar of whom I would like to serve? And what I'm noticing for me, and this might not be for you, but is if the prospect is just very transactional in their language and they're pinning you up against your competition, and all they talk about is price and me, and what can I get, then maybe that's not the client who you're best to serve, or at least it's not the client who I want to continue serving. And don't get me wrong, there were things that I could have done better in order to optimize my probability of getting the deal. But do I want to focus so much of my attention on serving that type of prospect? Probably not. I would probably just be better suited to figure out how I can go find clients that I enjoy to work with and identify who those clients are in the sales process. And so then the logical next question is, well, how do I attract clients or prospects who are similar to the ones that I want to serve? Well, I think this goes back to what I've already talked about. And one is you build a brand. You identify very clearly and define what your values are, and then you make those values known through your actions of your business, through the culture that you're building of your business, through the reputation in the community. And by clearly defining that, guess what you will attract? You will attract people with similar values. And I think this is especially important in marketing. So let me give an example. A common marketing channel in this industry is to send a mailer and it looks like a fake check. And I have never sent fake checks, and I actually recently launched direct mail. And one big reason I didn't want to send fake checks is because it was contrary to the brand that I'm building. I think some clients, and maybe most clients, realize that the checks are fake, but the whole point of sending a fake check is kind of to deceive the person into picking up the phone and thinking that is a legitimate check or it is a legitimate offer, and it drives a phone call. The purpose of the fake check is to drive a phone call. And that just wasn't consistent with the brand that I'm trying to build. And what I would imagine that fake check would deliver would be probably more clients who are going to be a little bit more transactional by nature. And again, that might be fine for some people. If you want to, maybe you're operating your business in volume and a transactional nature of a prospect is perfectly fine. And that fits what you're looking for. And if so, great. But for me, I don't want to deal with a transactional prospect. I don't enjoy dealing with them. And they tend to be kind of a pain in my butt. And so defining who you want to be, what type of business do you want, how do you want your business known within your community, and then marketing in a fashion that's consistent with your brand is going to help you find potential customers that are most aligned to the people who you want to help. Another thing I'm finding that is really important, when you realize that you can't serve everyone, what that means is you will, through your marketing, attract some people who are not a fit. And if you don't disqualify them, then what's going to happen is you're going to try to serve all of these different avatars. And the avatar who is not your main thing is going to be very confused or maybe even upset because they don't really understand what you offer, but you're trying to offer them anyways because you want to accept money from everyone. And I just haven't found that to be beneficial. And so what has been very useful for us is if someone calls in and they don't fit the prospect of the avatar that we typically serve, then we have a way to disqualify them. I don't try to convince them to sell their house to me. And I want to give you an example. There was an appointment that I went on recently, and it was a husband and wife. And throughout my entire conversation, multiple conversations with them, it seemed clear to me that price was very, if not most important. And they had some other concerns, but what they wanted more than anything was to try to get the most that they could get out of their house. So much that they would have questions like, Ryan, if there's old carpet, if I pull up the carpet, does that mean you can pay me more? And while I told them no, of course, I had to kind of backtrack with them and say, hey, look, to me, it seems clear that your number one priority is you want to get the most money. And if that's the case, then it's not going to be in your best interest to sell the home cash to an investor. You have conflicting priorities. You can't want the most you can get for your house, but then just want to sell it quickly. It's like you want to fly private, but you want to do so for the price of an economy commercial plane ticket. It doesn't work like that. And so at that appointment, based on what the person told me, I said, look, I repeated back to them everything that I heard. And I said, am I correct in what I'm saying? And they were like, yes, this is what we want. And I said, okay, well, if that's the case, then here are the avenues of how you will get that. And that avenue is not you selling the house cash to me. And they were very appreciative of that. And what was interesting is it evolved from initially what felt like a sales conversation to it evolved into a conversation of me just helping them. And then because I helped them, their body language and their cues and the conversation that we had, it was very clear to me that they understood I was just there to help, and their guard dropped, and I could tell that they started to trust me even more. And so to tie this all back, one very important way that you get better is you define very clearly who you serve, who do you want to be, and because of that, who do you serve, and then how can you disqualify or say no to other people. And then the third thing that came to mind when I was thinking about how to get better is just how you're leading your team. Let's say on the one hand, you have a company that has a sales leader who's talking to his sales team and is saying, hey guys, why don't we have any deals? We need more deals. Let's go. If we're not getting deals, then you're going to get fired. Well, your salespeople are just going to be scared, and out of nature, they're going to want to keep their job. And so they're going to want to do whatever it takes to get more customers in any way, shape, or form. If, on the other hand, you have a company who is a sales leader who's leading their sales team, and it is a very reward-based culture, and let's say maybe there are some issues, that sales leader dives in with the sales team to figure out what those issues are and to troubleshoot what they are. Well, who do you think, which of those teams is going to perform better in the long run? Which one is going to win? And a lot of times when I see my competition doing things where I'm like, ooh, sometimes I just have more empathy for the salespeople than anything else, because what the salespeople are doing it's probably just more indicative of what they're being fed by their leader. And there was this moment early this week. We just wrapped up a first week. I brought in a new salesperson, and I had him fill out like a end of week report, essentially. And his number one observation in his end of week report was how important the culture and the values are to me and the way that we lead this company. And I told him, I said, number one, just kudos for, writing a very detailed report. But two, it tells me that I have executed on what it is that I set out to, because that is the most important thing. Out of everything you could have walked away with this week, that's the one thing that if I wanted you to walk away with only one, that would be it. And so I appreciate you sharing that. The reason I bring that up when it comes to getting better and in relation to getting so good that your competition is irrelevant is if you clearly define what your values are and you stay consistent with them, and those values are in the best interest of your customer, and that is how you behave in your company, then over time, that is going to pay off. And so this might have sounded like a brief rant today. And honestly, it's more of a rant to myself, to constantly remind myself, I am 100% certain that as I continue on in business, I will be facing competition, as I should, because it's a free marketplace. Competition makes me better. But the more I focus on what it is that they're doing, and the less I'm focusing on what it is that my customer needs. And so I'm constantly reminding myself, focus on my customer. You don't win in business. The goal is to stay in business. And so stop trying to win today's customer and win customers forever. And then 3, don't stop getting better. I hope that was useful for you guys to hear. If it was, share it. As you know, that is the one way that this podcast grows. I appreciate those of you who are continuing to share. That is the only way that this podcast grows, and it is continuing to grow, and it's because of you. And so I thank you, and the way that you can thank me is by sharing this. So I appreciate y'all. I love y'all, and I'll see you in the next one.